All right, hello. I need to apologize. I made a mistake. This teaching from home thing is very, very hard. When I emailed you a couple of days ago, the digital scan saved out of order from the physical AMI stack as it's stapled. And so if you have the physical copy, that's what I need you to be following along with. The due dates on the digital scan are wrong. And so instead of going back and trying to fix it, I'm just going to use that scan, but also use the physical copies and just tell you exactly which page we're going to be working on each individual day. The physical copy is the one that we need to follow. I'm very, very sorry. This whole thing is kind of driving me a little bit batty, a little bit crazy, but I will eventually figure it out, even if it's the summertime before that happens. And so I want to thank all of you for being smart enough to follow along with me as I do these silly and dumb things that I've done up to this point. All right, so today is going to be day 12. So when you're looking at the packet, it's going to be the next page, originally labeled day 7, and on the digital copy, it's labeled day 16, but this is what it looks like. At the very top, it says self-concept, okay? So this is the worksheet that we are going to be working on. Before we get started, remember, if you have the alternative assignment, that your video is going to be due on Monday. And everyone else, please disregard what I said yesterday about you having a quiz on Monday. Instead, that quiz is going to happen on Tuesday. Because those papers were out of order, we actually have one additional page of notes we have to get to before you have that quiz. All right, so let's talk about self-concept. Self-concept is what you think about yourself, and it involves the notes that we talked about before, how we perceive information, how we perceive the things that we do ourselves. Self-perception, or the view, is that you have of yourself. It is the person you think you are. So some of us see ourselves as the good guy, some of us see ourselves as the bad girl, as the bad boy, and whether or not that actually lines up with facts isn't always the case. Sometimes some of the best people think that they're bad people, and sometimes some of the worst people think that they're the good guy. And so your self-concept is the person that you think that you are. It's formed by the beliefs and the attitudes that you have, and it's influenced by how others see you as well. How you were in the past, how you are today, and also how you're going to be in the future. And so self-concept involves all those different aspects that are wrapped up together. And it is influenced by how others see you, because how others view you is how they're going to treat you. It's going to reflect on yourself. You're going to look at the way that the people treat you, and if they treat you good, you're going to think, man, I must be a good person. If they treat you bad, then you're probably going to think the opposite. And so your self-concept revolves around all those different aspects. It's made up of many different dimensions, and so we're actually going to talk about these tomorrow, or on Monday, when we talk about the Johari window a little bit more in depth. But first, it's going to deal with your real self. That's your core self. That's who you actually are. That's not the person that we act like we are in front of other people or in different situations. All right, next is our perceived self, and that's who you see yourself to be. And so a lot of us perceive ourselves to be a little bit different than we actually are. So some of us might consider ourselves to be quiet, when in reality, we're the person who's very, very loud, maybe sometimes a little obnoxious. But that's who we perceive ourselves to be. That's often not what other people see in us. The next is your ideal self. It's who you want to be now, or who you want to be in the future. And so most of us have an ideal self that we see. I know that I do. I have a lot of flaws, I have a lot of problems, and so I have this ideal Mr. Gamble that I would like to eventually become, and it seems like I just never get to that point. And I know that a lot of you probably feel the exact same way. The next example would be the public self. So this is the self you choose to disclose to others or in public situations. The public self is usually quite different than the private self. People speak differently. People talk about different things in public than they would in private with their friends, with the people that know them the best. And so your public self is going to be a little bit more refined, a little bit more cultivated and cultured than your private self is going to be. Which moves us on to the private self. That's the self that you do not share with others. It's who you are in private. So if you're one of those people who runs home and puts on My Little Pony or Power Rangers and you don't tell anybody about it, that's your private self. And so you might not share with everybody else that you do those things, or that you watch those things, or that you think certain thoughts, but that is who you are privately. Then also, maybe not now, but eventually you're going to have a professional self. This is who you are in your job or your profession. And so again, this is going to be completely different than who you actually are, because it's going to be masked by this professional decorum. It's going to be masked by the ethics of the situation in which you find yourself in. So if you are a nurse, you're going to not, and you have a naturally sour disposition, you're probably not going to be that way when you're on the job, or else you're not going to have a job for very long. You're going to be a lot nicer, a lot more congenial, and you're going to just have this professional persona. The same thing with teachers. The teachers that you see in front of you are quite different than the teachers that get home and then binge watch Netflix for 14 hours or anything like that. And so your professional self is quite different. Next is your social self. So when you, this is who you are when you interact with individuals, groups, or in society or social situations. So some people have completely different social selves. I think that I do have a different social self depending on the groups that I'm a part of. If I know those people, then I am outgoing, I laugh, I joke. If I don't know those people, or if I'm not comfortable with those people, like sometimes I am with some large gatherings with my in-laws, then I get very, very quiet, very, very reserved. It's a completely different social self. And so your social self can depend on the context in which you find yourself, who's around or what you're doing, that type of thing. And these are all the same person, but these are just the different ways that we show who we are in these situations. Next is your intellectual self. So who you are as a student or as a learner, the part of you that acquires and uses knowledge. So some people are very, very studious. Some people really, really care about learning. Some people really, really care about getting good grades. Some people just really, really care about doing what they need to what they're told to do and what they're asked to do. And then some people are the exact opposite. They just don't care. They don't really want to learn. They don't value education. And so that's the type of self that you look at. And so sometimes people are quite accomplished intellectually and educationally, and sometimes people just kind of put that on the back burner. But that's just a way that we kind of conceive ourselves. And when we have that self-concept, it allows us to think highly or poorly about ourselves. Next is our emotional self. So it's the part of you that processes your feelings. Some people have a lot less emotion than other people, and that's okay. I, myself, share anger as an emotion quite a bit. I don't really share sadness a whole lot. Now, as you've noticed, and surely the first semester people notice, I've shown more sadness this year than ever because of my grandpa, and I talked to you guys a little bit about that. But your emotional self is the part that processes your feelings. So some people, like myself, process feelings in terms of anger. Some other people process feelings in terms of like having this fake happiness, where they're always happy, and then when they get home, they're sad. And so the emotional self can sometimes even, some people are just, they wear their emotions on their sleeves. When they're happy, you can tell it. When they're sad, you can tell it. When they're mad, you can tell it. It just depends on the person. Next is your physical self. So this is who you are physically, including the concept of your body, your athletic ability, your gracefulness, your coordination, your physical health, your well-being. And so the physical self is impacted by a lot of the nonverbals that we do. It's impacted by how we dress. It's impacted how we physically take care of ourselves. And our physical self actually goes into our self-concept, because if people that have anorexia or bulimia, then they have a distorted physical self. Inside of their mind, they see something that's not there. They see flaws that other people don't see. And so sometimes when you're overweight, like I am, then that physical self impacts how you feel about yourself and how you feel about different situations. For instance, if you're overweight, it's kind of hard to get dressed up really, really nice because the clothes are just uncomfortable. And so then you're self-conscious, and then you think to yourself, do I really need to be in this situation? And it leads to all these different thoughts and feelings. And so it does impact your self-concept. Next is your artistic self. the part of you that's creative or artistic. And again, those of us who are a little bit more creative, that does impact how we the concept that we have of ourselves. And often, really, really artistic people, their entire life revolves around that art, whether it be theater, whether it be music, whether it be physical art, drawing, writing plays, writing poetry. Your whole life revolves around that type of art. And so that's how you have this concept of yourself. Factors that influence your self-concept is how you perceive that you're seen and treated by others, so what you think others think of you. Next is your own expectations and standards that you set up for yourself. Some of us have really, really high expectations, very, very high standards, and so when we don't meet that, it impacts our self-concept. We think that we're not good enough. So even if our performance is high and above everyone else, we didn't meet that magical goal that we set for ourselves, and it allows us to have bad self-talk like we talked about a couple of days ago. Next is how you compare yourself to others. So a lot of times people will look at other people. I know that I'm doing it right now with COVID-19 happening. I look at how parents are seemingly being awesome on Facebook, on social media, and I am like, man, I'm doing a really, really horrible job. I look at some of these famous people and they're staying in their house. I watched this video about Tracy Morgan today, and he's got a bowling alley and he's got a full-size basketball court, and I compare myself to others. We do that same thing when we're talking about how we interact, all those public, private selves, and we think, man, we compare our private self with their public self. Of course, it's never going to live up. And so those are some things that we look at. So self-concept lays the foundation for your communication with with others, one-to-one, in groups, and in one-to-group context. It's important that you know that building a positive self-concept, it gives you confidence, and you need confidence in order to communicate effectively. It allows you to draw from your strengths, and it also tells you where you need to improve. So whenever you have a healthy self-concept, then you'll know when something's wrong and it needs to be fixed. That's different than focusing on things that aren't actually a problem, and that you just have some sort of inability to see it as the truth. And then next, it allows you to set goals for change. So if you have a positive self-concept, you can say, here's where I'm not doing so well, and here's how I need to fix that. And that can happen in anything. And so one of the things that I did do since we started this whole COVID-19 thing was I ordered a set of weights. And so I've talked about it in class before. I like to go to the gym every other day. And so I have a set goal for not only myself, but now for my kids, so that we can get a little of this anxiety worked out using these weights. And they finally came in, and so I'm finally getting to start using them. And also, the physical self, if you notice, I gave myself a haircut since yesterday. And so it just makes you feel a little bit better, makes you feel a little bit more professional. And then next is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's the prediction or the expectation of an event that shapes your behavior, making the outcome more likely. So if you sit around and you think, I'm so dumb, I'm so stupid, I'm such a bad person, then that's the outcome that's more than likely going to happen. The people that sit around and they think that they're the best, they think that they're smart, they think that they deserve good things to happen to them, usually that's going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy where those things do happen. All right, then the next thing is going to talk about self-disclosure. And so I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I'm going to talk about that in Monday's video. So self-disclosure is going to go with the Johari window. So the Johari window is going to, that worksheet will look like that. Okay, and so we will talk about self-disclosure